All right. Back again, guys. Good to be back. Hope everybody's enjoying the holidays. I certainly am trying to. So, this is going to be a long video. If I'm doing it right, it's going to be a long video. I'm not going to fit everything I want to talk about in this topic in the video, but we're going to cover the basics on how police patrols actually work. And I'm going to preface that and say how they work in a big city, okay? Because I work as a beat officer in a large metropolis, okay? Surprisingly to me, maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but I've found that people, when they ask me about what it is like being a police officer, I find that I have difficulty even starting with, I have to go down to the basics on almost everything because the general population doesn't seem to understand the day-to-day of big city policing. And I'm not shitting on anybody for that. It's kind of hard to, really get into detail or depth on how certain things happen in policing if people don't understand the underlying structure of how policing works day to day, like the very basics, okay? We're not going to get extremely nuanced in this. I hope to get a lot more in-depth and nuanced in the future about certain topics in policing. But today, this is just if you are just kind of curious in general, like what actually goes on as like a regular beat cop that you see around, you see some guy on his patrols in the city, what that actually entails, what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. So I've been working as a patrol officer in a major city. And when I say major, I'm not going to say what city it is, but it's a city of between 1 to 2 million people, and we're quite busy. It's a large city, it's a large metropolis, it's sprawling, and just like most of the big cities out there right now, we have a huge manpower shortage, and crime is not going down. Officers who are employed are, and that's going to play into that dynamic of high crime, low number of officers paired with low morale because of that and other reasons are going to play into some of the decision making you see day to day in policing, okay, in big cities especially. And you're gonna see why that is the case as we start to kind of talk about the responsibilities of a patrol officer day to day. And it is, I won't sugarcoat it. It's quite a lot. It's quite overwhelming. I say this as somebody, I've worked all kinds of jobs, okay, but the most time I've spent was actually in EMS, working on an ambulance in a more rural area, but it was quite a large area to cover, but it was a more rural area. I worked in EMS for 4 years prior to being a police officer. And I've worked as a police officer now for about 2.5 years. And I can tell you that my 2.5 years in the big city, the amount of things I've seen and done pale in comparison to the 4 years in EMS. Okay. So my expertise mostly in what I'm going to talk about, we're going to explain some of the differences between big city policing versus small versus, police departments, sheriff's departments, state police. But we're mostly going to be focusing on, the meat and potatoes of big city patrol. You need to look at as policing is not just a singular aspect of emergency response, but it's nested in a framework of firefighting, EMS, hospitals, and then you have your police. Okay, I package those together because those things are that you need that entire system for a city to function. And as a patrol officer, I'm interacting with each of those other sections of emergency response quite often, and those sectors are also, and those people are also going to be interacting with me. So they're all interconnected. We're going to be utilizing almost all of those on a daily basis in city policing. So not everything I say here is going to apply to your small town sheriff's department, your quaint little town with you've got two police officers that, they know everybody and they're 60 years old. I'm not shitting on that. I'm just saying that's going to have a completely different, they're going to have a bit of a different day-to-day experience than what we're going to be describing here. But I think it's important, the majority of police officers and the majority of the public's interaction with the police is with city policing, obviously, because that's where the most crime is. That's where you need the most police. That's where the most interactions with the police are happening. And that's where all of the big shit happens, okay? I would like to mention, kind of as before we go into all this, if you've seen my other videos, you know me, you know that, I'm a working man, okay? I've been working my whole life. My wife also works. I have a son on the way. I'm very busy. I'm actually doing this video on my vacation time because I want to make these videos. There's just not a lot of time to do that. And that's why the uploads are not consistent. When I talk about some of this stuff, I'm probably going to sound, it might sound negative. It might sound a little, there might be a tone to this that maybe isn't my usual. And I just want to preface that I absolutely love my job. I've never loved a job so much before in my entire life. I thought when I worked in EMS, that was the most fulfilled thing I could ever do. When I went into policing, it certainly is absolutely the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. It pales in comparison to how hard I thought EMS was hard. Policing is 10 times harder. It has pushed me in every single way imaginable to the extreme, and it has been quite dangerous at times. But at the end of the day, I love my job, and I don't just say this to cover my ass if my boss or something sees this one day. I say all this stuff if you catch a tone of maybe I sound a little pissed or disgruntled. It's because I genuinely love this job and I have a passion for policing, and I care so much about the idea of policing and how policing is carried out and the people that do policing, that I can be passionate about it. And there are things in policing that, some of it is just the way it is and it always will be, and there's no going around it. Policing is always going to be difficult. In the city especially, it's always going to be hard. But there are things that we're dealing with now, particularly associated with low manpower and communities that we are policing that could give two shits about the police and actively hate us, that there are problems that have arisen because of that. And they're going to come up here and there in this video. You'll see. But this is not a video for me to complain about. I'm not here to complain. I'm not here to vent about anything. I truly want people to understand what goes on in the back end of policing, how it actually operates. Because, body cam's all over the place now. And you can learn a lot from body cam. And people have learned a lot more from policing through body cam and what it's actually like out there. But a body cam on its own does not show everything else that is going on in the background that leads up to these body cams and to these things that happen. There's a whole other world of policing that paints every arrest, every situation that unfolds. There's a structure surrounding it that people don't understand how it operates and how it plays into the day-to-day decision making that an officer makes. Okay, and that's why I think it's important to kind of start with we'll do a basic overview here of what a patrol officer, what his responsibilities are, and what he's required to do. And then further down the line, we'll get into a lot more nuanced topics on specific things in this, and really get into the weeds on it. But this is just a basic overview of what a patrol officer does day to day. All right, day to day. So I have a take-home car. It's something I I pay to have the take-home car so I can drive it home. I don't have to leave it at the roll call, drive my personal car back to home, and then drive my personal car to home, switch into my patrol car. It's just easier to just pay the monthly fee to be able to drive it back and forth to my house. Going to roll call, my shift is from 1:30 to 10. That's middle shift. I personally want middle shift. I asked to be on middle shift. That is the busiest shift. That is when the most stuff happens. That's not to say that things don't happen on day shift and late shift. They certainly do. I did work late shift for a period, and late shift definitely has its fair share of crime, for sure. But overall, middle shift just has the most brute runs and 911 calls out of any shift. And a lot of those are bullshit. A lot of those are just, you get a lot of bullshit on middle shift. You get a lot of just stupid things that the police are called for that they don't even really need to be there. But there's also a lot of serious stuff that happens when people are out and about and when they are awake. So how the day starts off, basically, I'm going to go ahead and pull up this map here. So this is going to be for reference. I do not work in the city of Atlanta. I don't work anywhere near there. I think I've probably only been to Atlanta once in my life. But I wanted to kind of find a beat map that was a little bit adjacent to where I work. Atlanta is also highly populated like the city I work in. It was also kind of oriented similarly with just on a brief look of its highway system, how big it is, where it's at, the things surrounding it. But I was also able to find Atlanta PD had some beat maps you could look at, and I found that their beat maps were a little similar to kind of the structure we have at my department. So we'll be using this as kind of a reference to kind of explain how patrolling works. Looks like Zone 4's got 14 beats. Zone 3's got 13 beats. And that's usually how large cities are broken up. Is, you have like a large city like I don't know, New York, Cincinnati, Ohio, something like that, Nashville, Tennessee. They're gonna be broken down into certain precincts or districts, whatever you want to call it. I usually find they're separated at least into usually 3, 4, 5 to 6 different districts. Okay. And each have their own, obviously, because they're different regions. They all have, their own different clientele, their own issues. Every district will be a little bit unique to itself, and every district, due to its geography and due to its population and due to the crime it has, they will have slightly different ways of policing. Okay, and that is natural and it is intuitive, as you should. Different areas need to be policed differently. Okay, to address the problems that they have. You can see how, how these beats are usually done is if you see a larger beat, it's going to be an area that's more sparsely populated. If you see a very small beat, it's most likely because it's very densely populated and there's a high run load. Beats are structured around, they're structured intuitively around, their geographical location, but also it matters about like how densely populated the beats are. I'm sure every one of these boundaries is a major road that kind of helps to separate the beats. And so that's how they're delineated. So if you see these smaller beats, most likely it's there's a lot going on there, a lot of run load going out. That's why they have to make them smaller. And then that's why you can see like beat 413, beat 412, beat 313, 312. They're a little bit larger, probably a little bit less populated. That's why you're able to cover a little bit more of an area. As a beat cop, like I said, you're assigned a beat. When you're newer, you're going to be what is called a float car. I've been on about 2.5 years. I'm just now getting an actual beat that I will be in all the time. But, as a newer officer, it makes sense. You're a float car. It means every day you go to work, put you in a different beat because they want you to learn the area that you're in, the district that you're in. You want to know that. You want to know as much of that as you can because even when you're assigned a beat, you're going to be going all over the city, all over that area of the city. You're going to get pulled away from your beat. Critical incidents are going to happen around it. Maybe you're working up here near downtown Atlanta. Maybe you're in 303, but there's a huge shooting that happens in 312. You're going to need to respond to that. You're going to need to know the area. You're going to need to be able to help out, know where the hospitals are at, know how to get to the jail, know how to get to the hospital, know where the other beats are at, where other 911 calls are coming from. So you come in, you go to work. For me, we start out with roll call. Roll call is the first 30 minutes. Usually doesn't take the full 30. Just come in for a few minutes, check in. Everybody checks in. Shoot the shit with your beat partners. Get locked in. Maybe the sergeants, lieutenants will, kind of bring up some issues that may have been happening in the district that need to be highlighted. Maybe there's some people with some warrants out that are causing problems, or maybe, there's some robberies that have been occurring in an area. Problem things will be highlighted in a roll call. Get your mind right, and then you'll head out to your beat and start taking runs, start taking 911 calls. At least how it is with me and how I'm seeing most departments are nowadays. It's one officer per one car. Every officer has their own car. We do not roll too deep. Some bigger cities still roll too deep. I think that is honestly the best. I would love, and it is a huge advantage if you have two officers in a car for a multitude of reasons. I think the main reason people have gone away from that is purely due to manpower issues and budgeting issues. That's going to be a theme that's going to come up a lot in this, is manpower problems, and how that kind of manpower shortage is going to play a huge part in a lot of the discussions we have in this and a lot of the nuances of policing. Okay. So the area I work, it's roughly 85 square miles, and it has about 200,000 people within it. And on middle shift, which I work, we have the most staffing. In that most staffing for 200,000 people, we have 19 officers. I want you to understand, it's when you see body cams of police, they are very insightful. You can get a lot of good information from a body cam. What you don't understand as somebody if you don't work in policing, is the entire picture of what's going on. Okay, the public just sees an officer responding to a single call. Okay, throughout the day, in most busy cities, like I know I will average probably just runs that I'm dispatched to from a 911 call, not a run that happens in front of me or I kick up myself because maybe, we find some dirty butts on a traffic stop. We'll average in an 8-hour shift, I'd say 10 to 18 calls. In the summer, I've had as high as 25 runs that I've been dispatched to. And in the winter, I'll have as low as 8. Okay? As it is now, like I said, you go into work, every car, if we're properly staffed, there will be at least one officer assigned to each beat. Okay? One officer in 313, one officer in 304, one in 305. In a healthy department where they are fully staffed and they have the budget they need and they have the manpower they need, it would not be one car per beat. Most likely it would be either 2 cars per beat, at least 2 people in a beat, or it would be, you would group them where you would have maybe each beat have one person, like there would be somebody in 303, 304, and 302, and then they'd have a cover car. There'd be an extra car that would float around between the 3 beats or 4, however they want to structure it, and kind of fill in and help take paper, help take run. Because let's say you have 2 calls come out in beat 304, each call at a minimum is likely going to take 2 officers. So if you have a run come out in 304, you're going to have 304 tied up, and then you're going to have his beat officer, his beat partner, 303 coming over to 304. Well, you can see how that would leave beat 303 open. Okay? So while something's going down in 304, 303 has left his beat open because he has to. So when 303 has a shooting or, a robbery or somebody's trespassing, somebody needs to be kicked out of a store, now 302's got to go over there. Now, if you have a float car, it helps because now 302 isn't by himself. But, if you don't have that float car, if you only have one officer to each beat, you can see how quickly people can get pulled geographically away from their beat. And that's not a small issue. That is what increases response times drastically. And also you're pulling people into areas they're not as familiar with, which is a safety issue, okay? Because I'm telling you, you're going to be, criminals are not just sticking to the major roads, okay? You're going to be all over the place. You're going to be in backyards. You're going to be on alleyways. You're going to be all over the place. So just for example, let's say I come into work. I'm taking a run in beat 305. I'm the beat 305 car. I'm taking that arrest. I'm taking that paper. I'm doing what needs to be done. I've got another partner with me. He's coming from 304. How it is with our manpower staffing is then, 304 run comes out over there. The 303 car and the 302 car will need to go to 304. And then now these two beats are now open. And so then you can see if something happens over here, a car from down here will have to go up and take care of that while these cars are tied up over here. Or let's say you get a critical incident. You've got a big scene. Maybe you've got, a big bar fight, or you've got, a huge domestic, or you've got a shooting, and you've got something that happened in, 306 that needs 5 cars. And all these cars over here are in 306. Well, then you've got to have all these southern units that they're probably going to be coming up north to take calls in this like highly densely populated area, because it's going to happen. And so you can see how, the patrol officer, while they have their beat and it's top priority to, have responsibility for that beat. I don't want people coming into my beat and having to do the work I need to do. Sometimes it's inevitable. You can't be in 2 places at once. But a good police officer, you got to understand, we do this every day. People have been doing this every day for their whole careers. So they take pride and they should having beat responsibility, and you don't want other people having to come in and do your work for you. So that's kind of always running in the back of officers' minds is, I can't spend all day on, I need to spend the time that is necessary, but we also don't have all day to just sit around and deal with one call. When people call the police, I feel like oftentimes, and it's not always bad, they think that they're the only one in the city that needs the police right now, and their problem is the most important, but that's not how cities work. And the police are there to show up, determine if there's a crime or not, or if there's one that's about to happen or has happened. And if there hasn't been a crime and the police don't need to be there, then we're getting out of there. Okay? Maybe we'll write you a report or something if you want one. We'll try to solve the problem we can, but the police are not there to solve everything. We're here to handle crime. So that is why police, you might notice, maybe they're a little bit short with people. It's because not only do they need to get back in service, okay, and it's not only to get back in service to continue taking other 911 calls in their beat. It's also because, there are many times, this is a very common scenario that we have happen. If I'm beat 305 and I get called to some bullshit, or just something stupid that it's the 3rd time I've arrested somebody this month, or I come to this house all the time, it's a problem house, or whatever it is. We're having to be the police, take care of whatever this problem is, maybe for the 10th time this year at this same house. Maybe the beat just north of you, your officer gets in a foot chase, or he's got an armed robbery suspect running from him, or he gets in a police chase, or somebody shoots at somebody. Then you've got your officer up here, and maybe his backup is all the way down here because they're on your run, or they're on a shooting down here. Now you've got this officer up here all by himself, and they've got to pull other officers from miles and miles and miles away, and it's going to take some time to get up there and help him. Hopefully that can kind of help put in perspective why there is this, why the police, the police are no bullshit. They're not just no bullshit because, you think, your interactions with police, they're all just mean and they're assholes or whatever. Police, they have a whole district they have to be ready for every day. And every problem is its unique set of problems. If a patrol officer is quickly detecting that what is happening is not something the police need to be involved in, then they're going to want to get out of there. And it's not out of a sense of laziness. It's not out of a sense of just being rude to you. It's because they need to be in service so that when shit pops off somewhere else, they're able to be there for their beat partner. You have to put this into context, okay? There have been many times that, I've been on both ends of this. There have been many times when I am dealing with, a juvenile. I remember even recently, this would be a good example. And this can kind of describe to you the problem we have in the system as a whole. But I was dispatched to a juvenile who was fighting their parents again. They had already been arrested before I came on shift, a few hours before, by the beat officer on shift prior. They had been arrested and taken to the juvenile jail. The juvenile jail then immediately, after the child was arrested for battery, released them, made the parents come and pick them up. Like 2 or 3 hours later, they come back home, and then they start beating up their parents again. So I get dispatched down there. I have to then do a second arrest on a second obvious battery from the kid. And while that is happening, one of my partners pulls over a car with 2 dirty butts. One of them immediately takes off running. The other one ends up taking off running as well. And they get in a full-on punching match. And he's out there by himself for a minute, struggling with this guy who is certainly not wanting to go back to jail, and is in a full-on brawl with one of my officers. So you can understand why, police officers, that is why they are oftentimes very short with what is going on. I'm not gonna spend an hour sitting down with a juvenile, having a therapy session about how they need to stop wailing on their single mom. I am there to determine if a crime has occurred, and if a crime has occurred, if an arrest needs to be made. Does it need to be a summons? Does it need to be an outright arrest where you go to jail? Does a citation need to be made? What needs to be done? I need to make that decision, and I need to move on. I need to be ready to take the next run so that the other officers aren't out there by themselves or with their backup a long ways away. It's why you have to understand policing in the larger context. Okay, everybody thinks their problem is the biggest problem that everyone's eyes needs to be on, and every police officer and the chief needs to be personally invested in what's going on with them right now. That is not the job of the police. The job of the patrol officer is to determine if there is a crime. Okay, it's very simple. Is this something the police need to be here for? Did a crime occur? Did the police need to take care of that? Did the police need to divvy out consequences for a crime that has occurred? Okay, let's move on from beats. Okay, so on the base layer of policing, you've got the beat cops. They are the front line. They are taking 911 calls, all the crime that comes out, all that in progress stuff, all that report writing, all the ticket writing, all the arrests, generally being made by patrol officers on the day-to-day stuff. Then patrol, they're going to have their administrators. Usually that's going to be like sergeants, lieutenants. That's going to be the administration. Okay, sergeant, lieutenants, they're there to, help out on, big incidents, big critical incidents. They're going to be taking command on that oftentimes. They're going to be calling for other resources. Maybe they need to be talking with, like the SWAT supervisor to see if we need to get SWAT out for something. Maybe you've got something as simple as, a Karen or somebody is, doesn't like the decision you made and they think they know better than you. So they ask for your sergeant to explain the law to them. All the way to, administration and sergeants and lieutenants, they're doing a lot of back end paperwork. They're processing, things like overtime and training and reports and they're doing a whole slew of back end paperwork. Mostly what sergeants and administrators are doing is back end paperwork. That's kind of the blood of a lot of police departments. Okay, there's a shitload of paperwork. Okay, so you've got your patrol officers. They report to the sergeants. Maybe there's 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 sergeants on each shift, and that's who you report to. If there's any issues that arise, you'll report to your sergeant. So you have your beat cops. You've got your sergeants and lieutenants that kind of help to manage from a higher level how the beat cops are patrolling and what areas need to be focused on and doing a lot of the back end administrative paperwork. And then you have like a detective staff, okay? And I know for my department and bigger departments, they're going to have tons of different categories of detectives. Like I'm sure, like let's take Zone 3, for example. Zone 3 is probably going to have their own set of, each district is going to have their own set of detectives, okay? Like if something happens in Zone 3, every, you'll have your domestic violence detectives, you'll have your, auto theft detectives, you'll have your sex crime detectives, your child abuse detectives. Maybe you'll have a bomb squad detective. You'll have SWAT supervisors. So, there's you got the patrol, the admin, the sergeants, the lieutenants. Then you have the detective staffs, and obviously the detective staff. Patrol officers. Every day is a new day. Okay, patrol officers. Some of them, if you have the time. If you have the time and the ability, beat cops, not only will they take 911 calls, but they will also have maybe some prolonged investigations over time. Like let's say, if you're in beat 305, maybe you spent some time there and there's some narcotic houses. Maybe there's some trap houses, there's a lot of dope moving in and out, there's a lot of violent crime happening around that area. Maybe you're getting a lot of person stabs, person shots, you're getting a lot of overdoses in a house. Maybe if you have time as a patrol officer, which you rarely do now, but if you do, you can try to build a portfolio there to get search warrants for the house, to maybe stop some cars going in and out of the houses, get some good arrests to stop some of that dirty butt activity. Okay. But detectives are usually, when a patrol officer gets like a bigger call, like maybe a rape or a murder or a kidnapping, anything that's, a quite serious case that's not just your regular, DUI or your regular, you're arresting somebody who assaulted somebody else or somebody who stole a car. Anything that's going to be a bit prolonged investigation, that initial report's going to be written up by a patrol officer. It's going to get sent to a detective. They're going to start doing more of that work that takes a lot more investigation, getting to the meat and potatoes of what actually happened, building a case, understanding if there's a case even there, things like that, and then present that to a prosecutor. So you have patrol, admins, sergeant, lieutenants, your detective staff, and then you'll have your specialty units. So if people have the manpower, if departments have the manpower and they have the resources, they'll probably have you'll need some type of unit that is directed towards things that, like I said before, patrol is so overwhelmed with 911 calls and run taking for in-progress runs that, they don't have time to track down like people with high-level warrants, people that are on the run, people that, any large crime operations that are going on, any dope houses, any prostitution rings. That's going to obviously take quite a bit of focused investigatory time. So you'll usually have in bigger cities, you'll need like organizations that are specific to that. So you have your patrol officers, and then maybe you'll have your gang unit, or you'll have your violent crimes unit, or your warrant team, and that'll be it'll be those will be cops who they're not beat cops, but they are, let's say they're a gang cop. Everything they do, they don't take 911 calls. They go out and they focus on the gangs. They find out where the gang violence is. They make arrests in the gangs. They try to figure out, where the gangs getting their money. They try to close off their dope money, maybe money they're getting from selling guns, stolen cars. They're gonna be the team that is hyper focused on that stuff, and that is simply because patrol officers are too busy taking 911 calls. Because at the end of the day, you have to have, like, the city expects when you call 911 for the police to show up. So that's what patrol officers are there for. And then you have all the supporting staff that are there to aid in these higher level investigations. Okay. And then obviously there's a couple of, rapid response units, like that would be like your SWAT. Okay. So every big city is going to have some SWAT teams. Smaller cities will have them too. And, they're going to need to be ready to go at a moment's notice when some crazy shit happens, pops off in one of these beats that you're going to need a SWAT team for. Maybe you have a hostage situation. Maybe you've got a lone barricaded subject with the firearm. There's no reason to just, balls to the wall, just break down that door and get shot right in the head by yourself, when you can just send a SWAT team in there. They've got a lot more tools to handle that kind of a job. All right, let's talk a little bit about proactivity as a police officer. I'm going to have to do a dedicated video on a lot of the subcategories. I've talked about this. This is one that will need its own dedicated video too. You could talk for hours about what goes in to proactivity, why it's so important, why we're suffering now as a society with such low shortage of police officers and police officers who are not burnt out, why we lack a lot of proactivity and how that affects the communities that we're policing, and why that is affecting the crime. But we're just going to talk about when, on top of everything I've prefaced earlier, I hope you've been able to realize how busy the patrol officer is in the big city. Okay, so busy to the point where, when everybody in Sector 3, in Zone 3, is tied up on a run, you got to understand. I think a lot of people see cops in cities and they might see like somebody driving like an idiot, or somebody yelling, somebody all pilled up yelling in the street, and maybe you'll just see a cop drive right by, keep going. And people are always like, oh, fuck that cop. He's a lazy cop. Things like that. You have to understand that oftentimes now, many times now, as a patrol officer, me and everybody else I work with, we are constantly going to runs. You cannot stop every car that's driving like an idiot, everybody that's causing a minor disturbance. You have to make that decision on the way to a run. Hey, I'm dispatch. Let's say I'm working in Sector 5 and I'm going to a domestic down in 10. I need to show up to that run, not just for the people calling me, but also for my partner who's going to show up there as well. I can't leave him out there by himself. It's a dangerous situation. So if I see somebody being an idiot on the road, or if I see a minor PD crash on the road, the most I can do, I have to make the decision. If it's something really serious, I have to back off the run. I have to let dispatch know, like, hey, I got somebody fighting over here. Put me out, start me in their car. I've got to take care of this right now. But oftentimes, what you have to do is you have to make that decision of like, yeah, I see something that needs addressed as the police. It would be important to address it. But right now, I have a more important priority thing I have to go to. And so I just have to keep driving and I have to keep going. And that's not something that feels good. Cops don't want to do that. Cops, I know, they love to work. They want to work. They want to be out there. They want to be helping the community. They want to be solving crime. But when you're short like this, you have to put on the blinders. You have to quickly determine, is this something that needs to be handled right now? Maybe I've got somebody driving in front of me. Maybe I've got somebody driving on the road that looks like he might be a little drunk. Can I really back off of this run to do an investigation on somebody who may or may not be drunk. Maybe he is. If he is drunk, I'm going to be out of service for 2 to 3 hours doing a DUI. Now my partner's got to go to maybe a serious run I'm already on. He's got to go to that by himself until another officer from a farther distance can come on back onto the run and back him up. So do you see how you have to make judgment calls as a police officer constantly at your runs, on the way to runs, and it only gets more complicated and more dangerous and more bad for the city and bad for the police officer when you have manpower shortages like we have now. You literally have to make the decision of like, is this something I need to let go? I can't tell you how many times, I've seen somebody that I'm like, well, that person's got a warrant, or I know that there's going to be drugs in that car, and we're not talking about marijuana. We're talking about other stuff. I know there's going to be something dirty in that car. I know this guy's got a warrant. I know I got to do this, but I'm going to a serious run right now. We don't have any cars in service. We're going to have to get that later. We're going to have to do that later. And that is the trade-off you have to make as a patrol officer. Not you can't you're not a one-man army. You can't do it all. And that is, and people really don't want to talk about that, but that is the reality of where we're at now. So in the context of that, when we're talking about how busy it is for patrol officers on the patrol level, when there is time to do proactivity, so when there is downtime, most good cops are out there doing proactive things. Okay, that's not just traffic stops. Oftentimes it entails a traffic stop, but we're doing other things. We're walking, we're walking areas where there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of drug activity, there's a lot of bad activity at businesses that businesses call for, or that they want us to remove these people from their property. So a proactive cop, when he is not being when the rare times he's not being dispatched to a run or he's taking care of a run, that is the little downtime you can have to do your traffic stops and things of that nature. Now, in the city, as I laid out before with how busy things are, if patrol officers are doing traffic stops, there's one of two things going on. Okay, either you did something so stupid in front of a police officer, it has to be addressed right there. Like you're driving like an idiot. Maybe you run a red light. Maybe you almost hit somebody with your car. Something stupid. Okay, that the cop just has to, I got to pull you over for that infraction. We got to address it. I got to see what's going on with you. Okay, we can't just let that go. Or, I'm making a traffic stop or a subject stop of somebody outside of a vehicle for an infraction, because in the United States, police officers, they have to have a reason to stop you. In other countries, that's not the case. People forget that. In the United States, I have to have a reason to stop you. You have to commit some type of violation for me I have to have reasonable belief that you've committed some type of infraction or ordinance violation to your municipality to stop you and briefly detain you, to identify you and address that problem. Maybe I need to write a ticket or something. Okay. Outside of that, what the majority of cops are doing in the city, very few cops care about somebody not using their turn signal or having a taillight out or making a U-turn where you're not supposed to. If a cop is pulling somebody over for that, I pull people over all the time for a taillight out and for not using their turn signal and for speeding. And it's a pretextual stop. And I feel like people don't really understand what that is. I'm here as a city police officer to address crime. If I see your taillight out, 99% of the time in the city, if I'm pulling you over for your taillight being out, it's because I think there's other stuff going on. I think maybe the driver's got a warrant. Maybe the passenger's got a warrant. I think that there is illegal guns in there. I think there are illegal narcotics in there. I'm looking for guns, dope, and warrants. Okay? And I think that's the distinction I think it's this very old school kind of look on policing, is people think, especially in the cities. I can tell you in the city I work in, cops and the police department itself gets no money from any citation. That money does not go to the police department whatsoever. There are no quotas. There is no, oh, we're going to get better patrol cars. We're going to get a workout room. We're going to get whatever if we make so many traffic stops. There is no financial incentive whatsoever to make traffic stops, which I actually think is good. I don't think there should be a financial incentive for traffic stops. There is a financial repercussion for people who often need it, because some people only learn through those types of repercussions, not to repeat behavior. But besides that, city cops, they're pulling you over for minor violations, oftentimes because you've been so stupid that it's just got to be addressed right then. It's so ridiculous, it's got to be taken care of. Or, like I said, we're looking for guns, dope, and warrants. Okay? And, maybe someday we'll go through some of the traffic stops I make, but I can tell you right now, the majority of the warrants I get are from traffic stops. Okay? And there are, gone are the days, and maybe this is something they do, this is something they do more so in smaller departments that really don't have a lot going on. Maybe they like to run traffic because maybe they do get a kickback to the department. Maybe that is a part of their revenue. Maybe that's just all they have to do. In the city, there's absolutely no time to do any type of policing like that, to its detriment. Okay? Because I can't tell you how many moms and dads and store owners I've talked to who they pull me aside and they're like, man, the traffic out here is ridiculous. People are driving like crazy on this intersection. They're street racing. They're flipping people off. They're blowing the stop signs. Those are things that legitimately need to be addressed. But the patrol is on such thin margins nowadays. It has such thin manpower nowadays that there is no time to sit and do traffic for traffic's sake, which is important, but that just doesn't happen in the city anymore. And that is why traffic has gotten so bad. Not only on the highways, I'm sure the state police is also dealing with issues like this, but definitely in the cities. So when cops do have time to do traffic stops, I am trying to get the best bang for my buck. I'm trying to prevent real crime or identify real crime. I'm trying to find the guy who's got a slew of prior felonies, who's got a gun on him, okay, and who's going to use that for commission of another crime. I'm trying to find the van full of 3 narcotics dealers with a big bag of methamphetamine in the car. I'm trying to find, traffic stops and subject stops are done in the field by patrol officers. I'm telling you, the majority of the time it's a pretextual stop to identify, to stop and identify real criminals and find real criminal activity. And that is how the law itself is written all the way up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court recognizes pretextual stops. They're extremely necessary. They're needed. I can tell you the large majority of the people I have arrested for warrant arrests, not for outrights, and many for outrights too, but specifically for warrants, people who have committed offense and they are not showing up to court or they violate their probation. A lot of the real dirty butts I've gotten are from the pretextual traffic stops and subject stops. I see a lot of people who are always talking about how, I can't believe this cop stops me for jaywalking. Don't you have anything better to do than stops me for jaywalking or something simple as that? I can tell you right now, I have stopped plenty of people for jaywalking. And every time I've stopped them for jaywalking, it is 100% because I have reasonable suspicion that not only is the jaywalking occurring, but it's because they've got guns, dopes, or warrants. And that is why that happens. And you know what? Sometimes you stop somebody who you think's got that, and you don't always have a 100% hit rate. Sometimes you stop somebody and you stop them for a minor violation, and they don't have any of that, and that's okay, because you still committed the violation, It's not a big deal. You just got to identify yourself. We have to know who you are. Go through the stop. You can get on your way. You know, most traffic stops that, you know, you can clearly tell immediately if something is, you know, if you're not identifying yourself to me, 9 times out of 10, it's because you got a warrant. And that's what ends up happening. If somebody's telling me they don't have their license on them and they're fumbling their date of birth, they're giving me a name of, you know, John Johnson. It's a guy with a warrant. It's a gal with a warrant. That's just kind of a little insight. I think a lot of people don't understand why certain cops, you'll see, they'll like pull somebody over for something minor like a tail light. And that's another reason. This is another topic we're not going to be able to get into. But, you know, the person who runs, I think there are some people who don't understand because they don't have a criminal bone in their body, and that's fine. You know, I've had plenty of cars run from me and take off and flee from a very minor traffic stop. Who thinks that they're fleeing because they don't want to pay a ticket? It's not that. Every time we find them later, it's because they have some type of high felony warrant, or they had a lot of dope in the car, or they had a gun in the car and they're not supposed to have one, and that's a serious offense. So no, nobody who's fleeing from 90% of the time, people who are fleeing from minor traffic stops, it's not for the traffic stop, and every cop knows that and every criminal knows that, but the general public does not seem to understand that. I know that was long-winded. This is something I've been wanting to make for a while. I've been putting it off because it's something that I care so much about that I'm always kind of worried that I'm just not going to ever be able to really properly describe all the nuances of it. But I thought maybe we could at least start with this video, kind of laying a basic groundwork, foundation for this. There's going to be more to come with this. We're going to get into more specific topics. This isn't going to be a police channel solely, okay? It's not something I want to do solely. It's still something that I feel like even talking about feels like work to me. I mean, I do love my job, but I don't really like thinking about it outside of work, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now on my vacation day. So I would like to just do regular other fun videos, maybe do some more gym reviews, but there is going to be some more of this because I think it is good information, and I don't know if people don't really seem, there are some good people out there I've seen kind of get into some of the weeds on this stuff, but I think there's still some topics that need to be explored in this. But anyways, guys, thank you for watching that, especially if you made it to the end. I know that was a lot. Hopefully I'll get better at this stuff, kind of, you know, improve my speaking and maybe condense these a little bit more. But thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. It might be a little while. It's going to take me a little while to edit this and get this together. But we will do some fun stuff here in the future.